Stoops, and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video. And thanks to a person that recommended this HTUC, I'll try and leave them up on the screen if I can. This video is going to be on Barblast. Barblast is, in my opinion, one of the strongest walls in the entire game, and probably the best wall in the entire game. So, in order to know how to use Barblast, you have to watch this video. From sets to weaknesses and resistances to teammates, and of course, checks and counters for Barblast. This video has everything you need to know about how to use and counter Barblast. So I think this question is pretty obvious, but we have to ask the question in order to know how to use Barblast, what role does Barblast play? Well, thankfully this question is pretty easy to answer. Its base stats are pretty simple. Mainly, the only things you should be worrying about is its speed tier of 37. It's pretty low, but it is on par with some other stuff. And 57 melee attack is really low, so you should not use it. But it does have 91 energy, which lets it get up to 250 pretty easily, which is a pretty good benchmark for a lot of moves that are really high base power or support moves. This also comes in the fact that Barblast has generally low costing moves, which pairs up with its above average energy stat. But its main stuff you want to look out for is its HP, melee defense, range attack, and range defense. An HP stat of 96 is really high because, well, not really high. It's on par a bunch of the other bulky offensive Lumions, and it can be really good against some other walls in the entire game. However, its main selling points is its mixed high melee defense and range defense. This melee defense and range defense is really high, or rather really high in terms of both defenses being high, and from I would not expect, but a high melee defense and range defense mixed wall has high range attack for a wall as well. 89 compared with its ability high explosive does a lot of damage with water bomb and toxiblast, which actually does do really well against a bunch of other Lumions. So, with that out of the way, what role does Barblast play? Well, thankfully this is a pretty easy question. With the fact that it does have high attack and high defenses, it can be very bulky and it can hit pretty hard. So switching in, doing damage, walling a lot of stuff in the game is pretty important. So with that out of the way, I'll be talking about some other stuff like its resistances and weaknesses. Barblast's typing of Water Plus Toxic is actually pretty good defensively. Its three main weaknesses is Earth, Electric, and Mind. Mind types will as the meta developed. It's mainly Metatoad that's common, but also Cosmere Cracks and Ferroglyphs are stuff you can watch out for. So yeah, those are some stuff that you need to worry about. Electric types, well, mainly Electric types like Metatoad, Zulong are the stuff you have to watch out for. And other than that, there's not much other than Ileguana, Joltooth, and Elephage. So yeah, you have to watch out for those. And Earth types like Setimars and Tyrex are the main stuff you want to watch out for. But there is the uncommon Borok you can watch out for. However, weak resistances like weaknesses are pretty great, because you are resisting Brawler, Fire, Water, Metal, and Ice. And ice types like Tonjolin and Wintrix are common here, which is pretty great for switch-ins. Metal types like Valkyrie, Tyrex, Stratosaur, and Oxydrake, as well as Searknight are pretty great switch-ins. Water types is mainly only Luminami, which is the stuff you can switch in on, which other than that there's not much other common water types. Fire types like Chartiki and Searknight are the stuff you can watch out for and switch in on, and you do wall Chartiki and Searknight to an oblivion, so that's great. And brawler types like Kanibo is pretty much the only common brawler type, so you can use that resistance to switch it on C.B.O, and unless the C.B.O is running Raging Tackle, which admittedly doesn't do as much damage with Ambush, you pretty much flat out wall C.B.O. So with that out of the way, which is a bunch of Lumions Barblast can switch in on, we could talk about its sets, which is probably what you came here for. The first set of the day is going to be a melee wall Barblast with the ability of High Explosive. You can try and run Toxic Spines, but I wouldn't really recommend it, considering that, well, you know, it's so much of a worse ability compared to High Explosive. So yeah. The moves set of choice is Toxablast and Water Bomb. These are your most essential moves, and the reason why we're not running Tsunami is because Water Bomb costs less energy, and with High Explosive it does the same amount of damage as a Tsunami. And Toxablast is your main damage move because Toxablast is a move that scales with High Explosive, and that's pretty great. Rejuvenate is a good move to have because recovery. Power Focus or Poison can be your last 4th move slot. Other than that, there's not much you want to run. I guess Icicle Traps, but then again, Icicle Traps is not really great anymore, and there are better hazard setters, so yeah. The personality of choice is going to be very robust, Frail Sluggish. Frail Sluggish is mainly for, well, you really do not want to drop anything else, so this is your personalities, and very robust to tank a lot of melee hits, specifically from C.B.O, which you are the best answer for. So yeah, the item of choice is going to be Heavy Armor or Energy Orb. Energy Orb is generally good enough, but if you do want to run Heavy Armor, which is particularly needed for C.B.O, you can do that. And of course the TPs, 200 HP, 200 melee defense is pretty self-explanatory. 60 energy lets you get to 250 energy at level 50 battles. This lets you use a lot of moves more, but if you do not, well, this lets you use a lot of moves including with the heavy armor. But if you do want to run the energy orb, you can drop some energy and then put it to speed and run 16 speed to outspeed 0 speed Luminamis. So yeah, with that out of the way, I'll be talking about its next set. Barblast's next set is pretty simple, of a meme breaker set. Might be Jamie's. I saw this from his video, so credits to him, but if it is built by another person, credits to them. The ability of choice is yet again High Explosive. It's pretty much the only great ability for Barblast. And the TPs of choice, since we're not going to be talking about the moves too much, and oh yeah, I forgot about Very Smart. You should run Very Smart for Sluggish. 16 speed, like I said earlier, outspeeds I think it's Sluggish, 0 speed Luminamis. So yeah, 200 range attack is pretty self-explanatory. HP is self-explanatory, energy is self-explanatory, and range defense is for getting, while it is leftovers, it does get you above the 127 melee defense, which lets you get which lets Protogun get a melee attack boost in front of you, which is pretty great on its own. The item of choice can be Cuffs if you choose to, but I would particularly run Energy Orb, considering, well, you know, Energy Orb is one of the best items for Barblast because of its below average energy stat with no investment. So yeah, with that out of the way, I'll be talking about its counters and checks and teammates. The counters and checks to Barblast is Setamars, Ileguana, and Stratosaur. Stratosaur is mainly here because if you run Very Clever with the Magnify set, you actually get Barblast to 4-hit KO you, I'm pretty sure, and you get to set up free Magnifies, which in of itself is pretty great. Other than that, you can use Setamars or Ileguana. And I know what you're thinking. Well, why are these guys here? They get hit super effectively by Water Bomb. And that's the thing, Barblast doesn't have a lot of good defensive answers. Most of this stuff either gets hit super effectively, or they're frail enough to get hit really hard. So yeah, Setamars here actually does get a 3-hit KO by a Barblast, and I'm pretty sure with Hasty and 48 melee attack invested, it's a % chance to 2-hit KO Barblast, so that's pretty good. And Ileguana also, like Setamars, gets a % of 3-hit KO'd against a Barblast. It's leaning closer to a 4-hit KO, so yeah. And Iguana does get a percent chance to, well, it's a guaranteed 3-hit KO with a Thunder Strike. Not to mention you can use Barblast to pivot off of it into something else. So yeah, and the mostly that I would recommend of ways with dealing with Barblast are offensive checks like Cosmere Cracked. Cosmere Cracked does have enough bulk to consistently switch in for 2 turns and then use Psycho Blast or Setup, which is pretty great for Cosmere Cracked. If you want something against Barblast, then this is probably your best option other than Stratosaur. And Joltooth, Zulong, Ferroglyph, and Meditoad are other options for stuff against Barblast. The main reason why Joltooth is here is because Toxablast is in fact a 3-hit KO, I'm pretty sure at the very least. So yeah, you just have to run 200 HP for it. Zulong is generally not a great switch-in, but it is a good revenge killer if you're into that situation. Meditoad and Ferroglyph generally do outspeed it, so with this you can do a lot of damage. Try and switch in. I wouldn't try and switch in unless your Ferroglyph is Temper, but other than that, I wouldn't switch in. Meditoad is not a great switch in if they use Water Bomb, so yeah, you might see a common theme here, but a bunch of these offensive checks really fear Barblast, so yeah, it just shows of how powerful Barblast is. And of course, let's get on with the teammates, so let's get along with that. Offensive teammates sees returning stuff like Meditoad, and it sees new stuff like C.B.O and Tyrex. C.B.O is particularly good because as long as it gets into battle safely, it's going to break Setimars, Iguana, and Stratosaur. So yeah, C.B.O is pretty great. However, I wouldn't try switching in on a Stratosaur and yeah, using your Clobber because one, you're not gonna really be doing that much damage without the ambush, so you have to consider that as well. But you do break Setimars and Iguana, so that's a thing. Also, Meditoad is pretty great for it as well, and mainly because it switches on Stratosaur pretty well. It does well against Iguana, and not to mention it does do decently well against Setimars, not too well against Setimars though. And Tyrex is particularly great because it can try and switch in on Iguana. Unless it switches on a Setimars, it can lower its melee attack and do less damage. Well, Setimars does less damage, but mainly you wouldn't want to use this unless it's a defensive Tyrex, because using it as a switch-in for Stratosaur isn't particularly great. However, defensive teammates, which is the stuff you're mainly looking for, are Stratosaur, Tyrex, like I said earlier, and Harvesect and Obsidian. Barblast is generally a good wall for any Lumion because, well, its resistances are pretty great, so yeah. The metal resistance particularly helps out Obsidian a lot more, and Obsidian does help out with its weaknesses, so that's pretty great. Generally, all of these guys do work pretty well against Barblast. It helps with their weaknesses, it helps with other stuff. So yeah, other than that, let's talk about the conclusion and my closing statements for this. So yeah. So overall, I think Barblast is definitely a great Lumion. While I do not convey it pretty well that you should use Barblast in this video, I do hope this video is informational enough that you should try using Barblast. And yeah, it's just a really great Lumion overall. If this video does help you learn more about Barblast and stuff that would generally do really well on your team along with Barblast, then of course, well, thank you. Like the video if you found the video informational, and subscribe if you're into that, I guess. I do make more content like how to use encounters. Specifically, I think you should check out stuff like how to use encounter Pyrolin, Sinogre, and particularly my best work, probably how to use encounter Borok. But yeah, other than that, this is Cotton Stoops. Oh yeah, and yeah, I do have a Discord server. Go check it out. It's in the description and the pinned comments. As well as, you should also check out how to use encounter Swirl, which is a new Lumion that came out recently. So yeah, like the video, subscribe, and of course, remember that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.